Recently, I've surpassed 200 hours of playtime in a little indie game called Dorfromantik. As you might be able to tell by the length of the video, there's not much to talk about, but I feel like 200 hours of playtime show that there's something of substance here and that this game has more of a grip on me than your average puzzle game. So, as far as I can remember, I came across this game sometime in the summer or autumn of 2020. I bought this massive bundle of games called Bundle for Racial Justice and Equality that was released following the extrajudicial murder of George Floyd, and I was just browsing the hundreds of games and assets that were included in that bundle for a few days. And eventually, there it was. Dorfromantik. Created by the German indie studio Tucana Interactive during the Ludum Dare Game Jam number 46, it was a small puzzle game prototype about placing and matching tiles. Now, truth be told, the thing that caught my eye about this game was the game's title, Dorfromantik. It's German for village romanticism or village romance, not in the sense of like personal romance, like a dating sim, but rather in the sense of appreciating the romantic beauty of nature and rural life. You know, in a sort of artsy way. As a native German speaker, if you couldn't tell already, who also happens to live in a village, it was a surprise to see a game with a German title, let alone a title that speaks to me on such a personal level, so I gave it a go. And the beauty and simplicity of life in the countryside are really the name of the game here. If I had to describe it, this game is like a casual autumn walk through the countryside, without a care in the world. There are green plains, fields, forests, rivers and lakes, with the occasional settlement and train tracks sprinkled throughout, both of which show their age, as if they were stuck in simpler times. This old-timey feeling is also supported by the fact that the trains and boats are still steam locomotives and steamboats respectively, and by the fact that there are no road tiles to remind you of modern troubles, like commutes. But what about the gameplay? Well, the game is rather simple. As I mentioned earlier, the game was created as part of a game jam, with the theme Keep It Alive, so the devs decided to make this an endless puzzler. You draw hexagonal tiles from a pile and place them so that their edges align with the neighboring tiles. For example, if one side of the tile is a field, then the side of the tile next to it should also be a field. Or even more obvious, if you place train tracks, then the tile next to it has to be train tracks, since the tracks can't suddenly stop in a field unless you got the right tile. You score points by placing tiles and you get more tiles by completing objectives, like building a forest with enough trees or a village with a certain amount of houses. While I personally never heard of the game myself, apparently this gameplay structure is very similar to a board game called Carcassonne, but as a single player game. While I always noticed that Dorfromantik feels like a board game, even the developers said that they didn't think of Carcassonne when they made the game during Ludum Dare, and honestly, I believe them. Jams rely on improvisation, and I doubt that the developers read the theme of the jam and thought to themselves that ripping off some board game was a perfect fit for the theme. I think this is a case of multiple discovery, really, since the gameplay is quite basic. All of this might not sound like much on paper, but I'm not the only one having disproportionate amounts of fun with this game. The game has become a smash hit, with a 97% positive review score on Steam, coming from 15,000 reviews, and it's receiving awards left and right. What I think makes Dorfromantik's gameplay so addictive boils down to three things. It's low pressure, it's endless, and it's pretty. Now obviously, the main appeal of the game is building pretty landscapes, but if it was just that, it would lose its appeal quickly. It's why I never got into Townscaper, an equally pretty game that is often mentioned alongside Dorfromantik. Dorfromantik, with its objectives and bonuses for matching tiles, challenges you to build pretty landscapes, but it's still very low pressure. Townscaper, with its commitment to creative mode, is zero pressure and lacks any challenge to motivate the player, or me at least, in the long term. Unlike actual city builders, however, there's no real-time management where you need to think about electricity or sewage as fast as possible, or else your city will collapse. Quite the opposite. You can take as much time to think about tile placement as you need, even taking a glance at upcoming tiles or going one step back if you realize you made a mistake. If you pay attention to the footage, you can probably make out the times where I'm just sitting there thinking where to place the next tile, so that in itself is pretty soothing to play. But eventually, all those little mistakes start to pile up and you run out of cards. But you wanted to keep building, so you hit new game and start all over again to chase the highest score you can. Not necessarily to compete with other players, but to best yourself and make your landscape as large as it can be. And that's how low pressure, endless city building ends up becoming really addictive. Now, as I'm writing the script, I realized that another inexplicably addictive city builder that I like to play has the same core concepts as Dorfromantik in that regard. So let me also recommend the game Islanders by Grizzly Games. It follows the same principles, but instead of tile-based building, it uses proximity-based building. And the landscapes are more ancient Greek than German countryside. I only spent 80 hours in that game, but it's definitely worth trying as well. I got 100% in that game. Both of these games also worked well for me because they keep me occupied while listening to music or YouTube videos in the background. I know that might sound childish or dumb, but I have a hard time watching longer YouTube videos or listening to whole albums without getting distracted or bored and clicking off. So I like to play games as I listen to them. But most games tend to be too busy or loud for me to actually pay attention. And in that niche, Dorfromantik just worked perfectly for me. The game has a soundtrack of its own, sure, but it's so low-key and subdued that it's practically begging you to put something on yourself, and I think the devs wouldn't mind. Just take a listen. There are also the ambient sounds of birds cheeping, the train's steam engines, and the click-clacks and bops of placing down tiles, but I just turned those down to be barely audible and everything's alright. So yeah, not much left to talk about. There are ways to unlock new tiles, different biomes and stuff, but that's just cosmetic and you can figure it out yourself if you decide to play the game. I just wanted to talk about it because it's a cozy game that I spent way too much time in. So give it a try, like and subscribe, and see you next time.